And so it begins.
Just Breathe Live is a YouTube live stream where youth ministry has a say. Explore faith, spirituality, and life purpose as never before. And above all, bring your authentic self and just breathe.
We started a thing.
I was muted. I was saying hello. Good evening.
Hey everyone, welcome to Just Breathe Live.
Hello and welcome to Just Breathe Live, the podcast for youth and young adults in Unitarian Universalism. I am Shannon Harper.
And I am Eric Bliss.
We're here. We made it.
We did. Just barely, though, by the skin of our teeth.
We're starting to get the hang of this. Maybe we're not quite as awkward as we have been in the past. Who knows? Who knows what might happen?
Speak for yourself.
With that being said, we also want to point out that this podcast is for Unitarian Universalist youth and young adults, and anyone who loves youth and young adults or just wants to be part of our conversations, you're welcome.
And if you're not Unitarian Universalist, you're also welcome to join us. We are here and we're talking about liberal faith, and we invite you to learn more about it by going to uua.org if you are so interested.
Here are some of this year's greatest hits.
The whoosh.
All right, it's time for our whoosh. We're just gonna whoosh this thing, okay? And so it is time for our whoosh. Okay? So to do a whoosh, it has to be whole body. It has to be like deep guttural in your coming from your stomach. All right, so are we ready for the whoosh? It like I said, it starts here and you just whoosh. 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 And then a loud whoosh. Whoosh. Fantastic. It feels good too, right?
I love the whoosh. Okay, I'm changing the breathing and the guess. Favorite thing, whoosh.
And we're done. Total silliness. Hello.
I never want to be the first to turn on my video. I'm always like, who's gonna do it?
All right, I'm Shannon Harper, and
I'm Eric Bliss. Last time I checked.
It's what happens when two 40-some-year-old like ex-punk rock, hippie people decide
trying so hard, people,
have a live
cool.
stream together.
Are we succeeding? You tell us in the chat. Please don't. Please don't.
That's what we need. We need positive recognition and
that's right. Affirm us, please.
I love a good metaphor.
I love a good metaphor.
Metaphors are awesome. Similes, hyperboles. I get them confused, frankly.
We love a well-placed literary device.
Yes. It's definitely my turn to talk, and I definitely don't know what I'm supposed to say. I'm just going to put that out there right now. Okay, so now we have to say for everybody listening, here's what happens. Eric and I text each other on the side, and I said, is it time to wrap up? And he said, we should do one more question. I thought that meant that he had a question. So I was like, take it, Eric, you got the question.
Is it a podcast or is it a live stream?
Is it like a video cast? Like there's so many different words, so many different choices.
Yeah, I feel alive. So just breathe alive stream doing as you're watching this lovely live stream, live cast. Who's with us today, Shannon?
I think we use the word badass in our yeah, I know.
Hosts Shannon Harper and Eric Bliss interview youth and adult badasses.
Every time I hear it, I'm like, we did that.
I know. I get a little jolt of adrenaline when he says that.
I get a little jolt of embarrassment. Like, why did we?
Well, we could bleep it out. Youth
That'll
ministry.
be. You know, when you're young and you have your best friends and you're like, oh, we're gonna grow up together and then we're gonna have kids together and we're gonna do all these, we're gonna go on vacations together, and we've done it all together, including me marrying her.
That is absolutely brilliant. My best friend as a kid, we promised that we were going to buy a Lamborghini together.
Ooh.
Yeah, so
Still working on that
realistic expectations, unrealistic expectations.
Using a lot of their music lately. It's just the kind of folky, yeah, they've got us on speed dial, I'm sure.
You mentioned Christmas cards. I'm checking my mail every day.
Totally. I know that my congregation in Dayton, Ohio, will shout out to Miami Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Dayton, Ohio. Yeah.
Yay, Dayton. Dayton Flyers.
Liz, do you feel old?
Every day.
Youth.
Every day.
Youth that were in our programs are now religious educators. It's fun.
I got the warm feelsies with special guests. You'll find out.
Here's Eric and I being like, whoo. I know the story.
I don't like the spotlight on me. I don't like it. No. Sponsor us, Joe. Trader Joe's, if you want to sponsor us, by all means, we'll donate all your proceeds to.
That's what we need next. Sponsor.
So, in the continuation of our Trader Joe's theme, I did just eat some peanut butter cups from Trader Joe's, and they were delicious. I'm getting that little sugary kick from those peanut butter cups. And I am ready to go.
For those of you who don't know, we are really pushing for a Trader Joe's sponsorship. So whenever Trader Joe's reaches out to us, we will be happy to respond.
Call me.
Yeah, we're ready. We love Trader Joe's.
Today I put together this lovely lunch of olives and hummus and carrots and naan and these delicious Trader Joe's. Can I say Trader Joe's? Sweet potato crackers with bread and butter pickles. They're so sweet and delicious. Yeah, my taste buds are doing a little dance as I think about those delightful bread and butter pickles I had for lunch.
Podcast/videocast is not plugging Trader Joe's, but we are open to doing that if Trader Joe's wants to reach out to us. We'll
take a sponsorship.
We'll take a sponsorship. Yeah, great. Nuggets of wisdom.
Youth Spirituality Pilot with Lee Blythe and Reverend Christopher Watkins Lamb.
I'm going to ask myself how I'm doing. Sorry, I had to think. And I did. And I looked at myself in this mirror and I recorded a question and I played it back to myself, like not looking at the mirror. And then I looked at the mirror and I talked to myself about how I was doing. And the thing about talking to yourself is you don't have to hold anything back. Something I think is just the simplicity, like of finding spirituality or grounding practices. And then I know that especially in my age range, procrastination is a very big problem, and even I can attest to that. So,
Never.
So like just finding simple ways to practice spirituality that either don't take too much time or don't take too much setup.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of too small to fail. It's like pick something that's too small to fail. What feels like such a breeze. I can take 3 deep breaths in the morning when I get up. That, whatever it is. The thing that comes to mind for me, I think spirituality is about meaning, purpose, and connection.
The Other Side of the Bridge with Malika Gottfried and Chloe Emily.
Change is so incredibly scary to face, no matter how much you think you prepared for it, no matter who you've talked to, how much advice you've been given, whether your parents or guardians approve of it or not. Just doing something new, it's such an exhilarating experience. No matter how terrifying it is, just go for it. Like
what I want to see. And I think it's hard because I don't know what I need right now. And there's so much that is changing in our world. And every day I just taking down systems and relearning how to be in the world and remember what brought you to Unitarian Universalism, why you were so passionate and excited about joining all these things or doing whatever you're doing.
I don't know. Molly, I'll ask you this. Where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years?
I have no idea. It changes. Like I was saying before, it changes every day. I'm like, I have no idea what I want to do with my life.
Realizing that I could talk to people and that people would listen.
I have to lift up something Sam Wilson said in the chat. How do I get to be as wise and grounded as both of you when I grow up? Rising Appalachia.
I'm Leah Song, and Chloe and I are often in the same room, but we're actually just a stone's throw away from each other across a mountain in southern Appalachia.
Hey everybody, I'm Chloe. She, her, and just swooped in off the road. We had a show yesterday and down in Florida, and now back in the mountains, and happy to dive in with some conversations with y'all. Thanks for having us.
So we started in like the most grassroots way you could imagine. We're sisters, same mama, same papa, like the OG sisters, and we just grew up with a lot of this music on our front porch, and we were hoping to also use instruments and song catching as a way to travel and gather with people and really have a finger on the pulse of a kind of world culture in a lot of ways. We wanted to be in regions and connect with our communities and connect with the local food and connect with whatever the trials and tribulations of different communities were, what to call what it was that we were trying to accomplish. And that's where the slow music movement got its name.
So it takes a certain amount of ego to, make art and put yourself in there. But actually there's a lot of other voices from generations past and generations forward that are like in this alchemical mix. Incredible amounts of people behind the scenes, the fans, the muses, we like call in muses when we make albums. Like there's just a lot of really cool mixing that happens in order for a song to come out into the public.
The first thing that comes to mind is obviously listening, but also we talk a lot about this notion of a concept called empowerment failure, which is this idea that actually like everyone is vying for power or vying for the lead. And there was something really graceful about just passing the lead around. There was no need to challenge leadership. You got to actually sit back and be like, you're the lead, and I'm gonna totally go where you want to go.
You need to just feel sturdy enough to go somewhere new or fresh or get wild or get creative or I don't know, just get somewhere new. And that's where we're all at in the world, whether we like it or not. I feel like self-care is like this sort of like hip word, but it's so real, like just taking care of your body. For us, it's our vocal cords, your spirit, tending, like daily practices, tending to yourself, tending to your fire, tending first there and then to one another. I can see a lot of people in our sphere because we're around a lot of arts activists, or at least we were when we were touring a lot more. And it's like, I think people want to tend outwardly sometimes more than inwardly. And then you can see that fraying. We just want to be authentic, and that's what's really amazing about folk music. It's by the people and for the people.
Ministry is a very beautiful word. It is the concept of I think holding an audience and hoping that you can bring uplift, which I very much do think is what we do. But I like what you're saying a lot, Chloe, which is that I think our biggest job, which is sometimes really complicated, is to listen and sort of sift through all the noise and see if we can craft a response, some sort of sonic soothing or uplift or even agitator, that is a response. work is to pay close attention and then to create from there.
And I would love to just know, what is your message for the young people that
Don't rock. You have a lot on your shoulders, and you're rowdy, and you're ingenious, and your creativity and probably edge pushing is going to bring us all salvation that we don't even know how to look for yet, you know?
And so find that balance of like finding your joy, finding your passions, you know. There's just a lot of weight on the youth carrying, especially the climate change work. And it's both inspiring and sad sometimes to me to see like the heaviness of it falling on teenagers. And so I think now for youth, it's like, how can they discipline themselves, and how can families help discipline of like just getting out into the world and shaking it off and
like talk to strangers.
Yeah, like just get weird. So
Resonance and Activism with Martha Durkee Newman. Resonance, like what does that even mean? Like
when you have two tuning forks in the same room, and I will tell you, my owl 13-year-old youth could probably explain this to me because they know a lot about science right now. So when you have two tuning forks in the same room, when you hit one pair of tuning forks, they resonate, and the others start to resonate also on the same frequencies. Something in these tuning forks resonates on the same frequency as these ones. So then they're resonating together, and they're doing these mimicking movements together in the air, despite the fact that these ones have never been hit. I love that. That makes me feel good. Like that knowing that is a thing that happens in my universe feels good in my body. Applying acoustic resonance to storytelling. So when somebody tells a story, you can use acoustic resonance as a different way of engaging deep listening. And so the way that I think about this is when somebody is telling me a story, especially something personal and I something that comes from the heart, I listen with resonance, not for the things I don't understand, the questions I have, the stories that I want to tell that person about my own life experience that connects, not even the moments of connection. Instead, I pay attention in my own body to when I resonate on the same frequency. So when something that person says in their story causes my tuning fork self to resonate on the same wavelength. And it's on those moments of some kind of deeper, different level of connection that then we build from. I don't know y'all's theologies, but that is spirit, that is God, that is the divine. I don't know what it is. That's up to you. I think one of the places where we lack skills collectively as a people is how we listen. And this is one of them. This is one of the tools of listening deeper and better. And I'm a believer that the tools in our toolkit are revolutionary and transformative. And this is one of those revolutionary and transformative tools that we have access to. And that is, Janet, I love what you said. It's easy. Our bodies know how to do this. We know how to do this, right? Our tree, nature connected selves know how to do this. When somebody says, okay, this is exactly what I want you to do, is listen to your body and see when your tuning fork self bzzz, and you can. And that is a really cool thing also to be, because this happened to me exactly. I'm resonating with what you were saying of like the first time I had to do this, and I was like, oh, I'm not gonna know, like what's gonna happen, and then I just knew my tuning fork self did a buzz, and I was like, that's it. And it's cool to be caught off guard about knowledge that your body already has. Both this listening for resonance and how to tell stories really from the heart are two of the tools that are gonna transform this mess that we're in. So one of the things I have learned how to do is to know what are the resources that I have access to that are cup filling for me. And something that I've been working on with a lot of intention is the intentional spiritual practice of the cultivation of delight. So I sometimes go through my life scanning for moments where I feel delight, and then I hold on to them and I try to revisit them and do them more often. Going into Trader Joe's and buying a bunch of products that have fun shapes on the labels is something that brings me delight. And so sometimes I will do that as a spiritual practice, just me in the Trader Joe's with all the fun labels. When they have moons and stars and animals, that's my favorite. So I get and then I have some really weird products, and then I try to cook myself something with the weirdest, most fun labeled products at Trader Joe's. And that brings me just delight. So that's one of my gut filling strategies, is the cultivation of intentional delight. So content warning for the practice of delight being a soul crushing one at times.
People will, I mean, this feels so accessible, and it feels like something that groups, especially if youth and young adults are watching this in groups, this is something that like a group that regularly meets could so easily do.
So, again, this practice came to me very much from the grassroots through Movimiento Cosecha.
Mental health first aid with Roddy Biggs and Lane Diamont.
Mental health first aid is about encouraging people to know the signs and symptoms of mental health challenges, so that if and when someone in your life goes through like a mental health challenge, you are ready to be that kind of like first aid, that first point of contact, to help them right away, like working with that person in an open conversation, and then helping them on next steps, like seeing a mental health professional or self-care in that. So it's about like being that first point of contact.
What are some of those signs that you're taught to look for?
Like a departure from normal, like a person's kind of normal behavior, like withdrawing from social interactions, maybe like, yeah, like just changing or giving away certain things, or seeming more down. Kind of sometimes it's not like as clear. It's just maybe they seem different.
Mental health first aid is really the initial point of contact. It is a way into having these types of conversations that society tells us we can't have or that we shouldn't have. Again, the point of mental health first aid is not to be the one doing that treating, but to be the one to be able to fine tune the conversations, to listen, to hear what's going on, and to be able to point people in the direction to find healing. So not just referring people into the system, into a medical system of mental health.
Because I think that was the thing that attracted me to the training the most, was that it offered like practical skills for having those conversations.
It's better to say the wrong thing and to learn from it so that someone knows that you care, than not saying anything at all because you're so worried about getting it right. And that's something that you especially need to hear. So I'm going to say it again. It is okay to say the wrong thing.
When we talk about mental health or self-care, there's not like a one size fits all, and that like we shouldn't make the conversation like, so what is self-care, and then define it in these like particular ways, because that like excludes some people inevitably. And so it's more about like when we allow for open conversations, then that lets people kind of make it personal or make it specific to like their needs. When you're in a mental health challenge, like I think that it might be difficult to like even think about self-care, like doing anything, and much less, like community care. So I feel like what the idea of that is it takes the burden off of the individual to like care for themselves, and maybe just like rephrasing what self-care looks like is just reaching out to someone else and allowing that person to like help you and to take steps for you, so that you don't have to do everything.
Community care is self-care. So if you're working to take care of your community and care for each other, that means you're also taking care of yourself.
It's not, let me fix you. It's not, oh, I have the answer for you. Here it is. It's, you have the answer inside of you. Let me help you get there. And we'll journey this path together.
UUism is very well placed or well positioned to have like this conversations about community care, because we're covenantal, and like a lot of our values are connectedness to each other, and because we covenant to support each other in our search for truth and meaning and for love.
There was a practice of normalizing, asking somebody, are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of ending your own life? So practice that. Normalize asking that question, because one day you might need to ask that question and it could save someone's life because you did.
UUs for Climate Justice with Noella Prescott and Zoe Johnston. Let's go old school. Like let's go back to the basics and do a weather report check-in, because that's like one of my favorite check-ins.
Climate justice, weather report.
Weather report, yeah.
For me, I like really get hope from little like local actions that I see like around me. And this is a very small thing, but like recently we had a clothing drive at my school, and like I saw so many people get really like passionate about it. And like I think what really gave me hope was just like everyone was so excited. Everyone like we got so much more clothes than we ever thought we would have gotten. And like just like to see that so many people were excited about that really made me hopeful.
I think for me, the developments that give me hope is I'm seeing like a tendency of people to recognize climate justice as not just an intellectual and kind of scientific problem, one that we can think about and that there are numbers and statistics, but it's also like deeply personal and emotional and physical. Yeah, hopeful that the way that we are holding each other through this empowers us even more.
Well, I definitely think, like you were saying, there's a lot of youth leadership, and a lot of people like want youth leadership, which I really like. I really appreciate that. I think a lot of adults are more like willing to listen to youth now, and something I really want to see in the future is like some kind of skill share, or like I want to learn from like people who have been doing this for a really, really, really long time, and I want them to like be able to listen to youth and kind of just like I feel like there's not that much dialogue that goes on like intergenerationally. Like in a lot of organizing spaces, like either all youth or all older people. And I kind of want to like see more listening to the lived experiences of each other. I just want to hear all these different voices coming together. Well, I think one big thing, I think definitely in the US it's talked about too, but in Canada, like it's really, really highlighted like the influence of Indigenous voices that should be lifted up, because they've been like protecting the land and listening to the land, and they really understand it more than people who have colonized it in the more recent years.
So the call for divestment happened in June of 2021. And divestment, for those that may not know, generally means like calling on companies, institutions to pull their money from. And it came to light that we had the UUA, by means of the Common Endowment Fund, there's a lot of kind of different pieces, but that the UUA had money invested in JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, ConocoPhillips, Citibank, all these kind of financial institutions, and then ConocoPhillips as a oil company. These financial institutions have been major funders in fossil fuel projects. Deeply connected to it is that we're trying to live in this world according to our values, and our values aren't just some abstract thing that we tell people when we explain what it is to be a UU. Our values show up in our actions, and one form of actions is our investments. And so what does that mean as a faith organization to have investments that don't reflect our values?
It's really important to really watch for your own mental health when you're seeing stuff about climate change, because it can be really damaging and there can be a lot of bad news these days. Some resources I like is CBC, and I just found this new one called dailyclimate.org, and I really like it because it has this section you can go to which has just like a bunch of good news, and that's where I've heard about the coral reef thing, and it just has like a section so you can just see the good news, and if you ever need like a little break and see some good projects that are being done or some good moves that have been made, then yeah, that's a really good resource.
Something that's really necessary is not just reading about things, not just hearing the information, but finding ways to get involved. I think that being involved in community, being involved in action, balance that information with action, and to say, even though this is happening, I know that we are doing something about it. On a personal level, being really intentional about like our relationship with nature. The work of recognizing the world that you are inhabiting is a really great first place to start.
Mycelium Youth Network with Eric James, Linnea Granberg, and Casey Stainsby.
So mycelium basically is this thing that got envisioned almost 2 years ago now. And it's it's like a youth network that aims to like connect youth across the country, connect youth more regularly. So it's kind of a youth representative body, and we really wanted to promote youth engagement in like nationally, facilitate youth dialogue, and just to foster like a greater youth presence in Unitarian Canadian or Canadian Unitarian Universalism. Eric and I are the youth observers to the board. So basically what our job is we relay information from the board to the youth and vice versa. And we do a lot of other stuff now because of mycelium. But
we've been pretty inspired. I mean, I've speak for myself. I've been really inspired recently by nature metaphors in organizing, and reading Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy for one, which I was lucky to be in a group facilitated by Shannon last year for religious educators, reading this book and thinking about all the ways that we can model our organizing off of nature. And this metaphor that we landed on was of mycelium networks, which are like the underground, not quite root systems, because it's not roots, but it maybe looks a little bit like that. It's like these mesh networks. And then the mushrooms that you see that pop up above ground are kind of like the fruit of the plant, but the plant itself is like all the mycelium networks. They're underground, they're like everywhere. They're like really talking to each other and helping other plants connect. And then the mushrooms emerge when the conditions are right, like when it makes sense.
Don't know, a fairy ring is a ring of mushrooms. So we felt that that was appropriate. It's also really cute.
It's a youth gathering. There's a lot of open-ended moments and things change on the ground. But that's the fairy ring. It's kind of like, if you want to think of it as like an executive of part of a group, it's kind of like that. That's the group of people that meet more regularly to plan what will happen when we meet in the gathering and to help keep everything cohesive and working together.
One of our like criteria, I think, when naming it was like, okay, it should be something meaningful, but we also need to be able to fit 2 U's in there somewhere.
There's growth. It's just a brilliant metaphor. And when I first heard about it, I was like, not only is it brilliant, but it also has the possibility for 2 U's.
Anytime we can put in the 2 U's.
Doubly brilliant. Which there's a subtle irony there, because it's the Canadian Unitarian Council, right? Not the Canadian Unitarian Universalist Council. Although, side question, is there any talk about becoming the CUUC?
Well, that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, you're going to need a different episode for that. The short answer is yes, that has been brought up, but it goes a lot further than that, I'm sure.
In November, the CUC and like all the member congregations of the CUC passed the principle in Canada. And so our, yes, like that's great. Approaching it from a place of like a more spiritual place rather than a discussion place.
But there's always usually some kind of fun activity, maybe a little more spiritual kind of a worship for people interested in that kind of thing. The goal of this is people who may not be able to travel to a conference or who don't like going to things in person, or for whatever reason, this is a different avenue that you can connect to that community as well.
Like, it sounds really cool and awesome and accessible. I think it is all those things. And we're also struggling with actually getting a lot of youth participation. We've had handfuls, I think, so far at each of our gatherings.
You didn't create this as like, this is something we're just going to do right now while we can't meet in person. This is something that you want to be ongoing, and that you actually see like gathering traction as people do meet in person. That's a fantastic way of looking at it.
If you're not going to a youth con, and then you're either hanging out with your local youth group, but there's not a lot outside of the once a year conference, or if you're going to a regional one and a national one, maybe 2 conferences a year. And this is meant to be kind of a space where you can hang out with your youth community, people who you met at conferences, people who you met online, any combination of that, but you can hang out with those people all year round, which is part of, it's easier to do that online. Obviously, you can't go hang out with someone across the country every weekend, right?
So I want us to like be patient with ourselves too, and like really focus on like just being together and like healing and like learning what it's like to be together again, and like envisioning what we want this community to be for ourselves before we start trying to like necessarily rebuild or like build something really new and shiny.
Well, we don't want to rush into creating something new. We also need to find the balance of recognizing that, like Lene and I particularly, we're basically at the age where we're going to age out of youth, at least like Canada's CUC definition, and become young adults. So to remember that youth is not one big group and there's different groups, and it's possible that in this process to rebuild or create something new, the thing that will come out on the end won't look the same as what we had before the pandemic. And we shouldn't be trying to create something that's exactly what we remember happening.
That's where we need to be, is we need to have access to just the like community and the love and all of that. And if it happens online, if it happens in person, it doesn't matter, it just needs to happen.
Spiritual Direction with Noelle Burke and Shivani Gelfand. All right, it's time to get to the good stuff.
Spiritual guidance is a companioning of someone in their exploration of their relationship to the sacred, the divine, and or their own self, their own soul, their own spirit. And a spiritual guide creates a relationship of profound trust in one, especially in one-on-one, but also in group spiritual guidance between themselves and the guidees by listening deeply, asking critical questions, and really holding the container for the exploration and experience that the person's going through. And I feel like spiritual guidance helps to unlock and open the deepest parts of ourselves, our longings, our intuition, our fears, as well as our connections and the most intimate questions that we carry around in our souls, which I think is one of the things that's always excited me about being a Unitarian Universalist, is questioning and that invitation to question and encouragement and support in that.
From over the past few years, I see it as, deepening my spiritual relationship within myself and then with the others that are involved, especially in the role of the spiritual director. You're helping that other person grow and nurture that spirit. It's you try to put up a wall, but it's also learning like, okay, tear down that wall. It's a safe space. And that's really hard it's really hard in general.
A group spiritual guidance too, there's really a magic to witnessing each other's deep sharing that I think people just have relief when they realize that they're not alone in the challenge they're facing or the trauma that they've had or the questions that they're exploring. Group spiritual guidance can really be a balm on the wounds, on the wound of loneliness, because it allows that intimate connection and sharing.
Well, I find myself as a spiritual person. So when I heard about this spiritual direction training course in Ohio, that's what Shannon mentioned. I heard from Nancy Combs Morgan, and I heard about open enrollment for youth and young adults for the course, and I couldn't drive to Ohio fast enough. I wanted to be there. It just called to me. It was just a feeling, and just to be, specifically asked, like, oh my gosh, this is me. Learning how to treat my spirit, how to nurture it, how to treat my spirit better, and learning to be vulnerable. I would say that was my first exposure to it.
Having a spiritual companion, Shivani, you said that you have your own spiritual companion, and I think that's a requirement for for actually going through a course in spiritual direction. One of those, I have looked into them. They're very fascinating.
Yeah, I think some of the different reasons people come are if they're looking to connect spiritually with themselves, but they don't know how. Spiritual seekers needing some kind of direction. Also those looking for meaning and purpose in their life, or deeper connection in their relationships, or to themselves. Like I think about love and belonging a lot as themes, because those are things we're always told we have to get from outside of ourselves, right? But really, truly, love and belonging begin here.
I would say for anyone interested or has an interest, do it. There's a lot of benefit, just that, you can learn more about yourself. It's a big perk. You can learn about others that, you're going through this deep connection together. Sometimes it's hard, to do it by yourself. And so having a companion is, they're there. And I mentioned accountability earlier. It's you don't really have to, talk, or they have to, it's not like a homework assignment. It's just, all right, I'm doing my own work and I know that they're doing theirs. Really, like, you wouldn't even realize that your body needed it, your spirit, so try it. Dip a toe in, dip something else in, give it a shot.
Because our faith is so supportive of this exploration, I think we owe it to ourselves to integrate it more into our work, and especially to normalize it as a part of our practice with our youth and young adults.
That therapy is not direction, and direction is not therapy.
My role is to connect them to the spirit that is behind that. Is there another time that you felt this way? How connect them to their feelings, get them into their bodies. Where are you feeling this discomfort, this stress, this anxiety, or with this person? Where is that in your body? Can you think of other times when you felt that way? What has helped you to heal from that? Always returning it to the spirit. One of the reasons I steer away from the word direction is like, I'm not trying to tell you where to go.
There is a bit of overlap, being the deep listening, listening and the care. You have to have that compassion and the want and need to be there, because if not, then either do not apply. I can't even explain it on how amazing it was, but I hope you can tell, like, the sincerity in my voice. Like, you have to experience it yourself or give it a try, and then you'd have that experience for yourself.
Dinner Church with Reverend Aisha Ansano and Reverend Emily Conger.
What exactly is dinner church?
I always like to say that dinner church is exactly what it sounds like. It is dinner and it is church. So it's a worship service and a meal that are connected together rather than one following the other. And it's a way to tap into the heart of being an embodied spiritual community with other people. It's an ancient practice, and it's also very modern and can be really leveraged for the context that we find ourselves in now. It's really, really powerful, but it is worship that includes a meal, and it's just part of it.
Well, we are leveraging ancient spiritual technology here. Through the centuries, people have gathered around a meal for worshipful occasions through harvest rituals or Passover seders, or early Christian communion and agape love feasts. So these are things that go way deep. And
I think a flower communion dinner church would be so much fun. This is a tangent. I won't go on my tangent. Tangent, sure.
Tangents are always welcome.
We love tangents.
I made like a flower communion focaccia. I saw like this really beautiful focaccia bread with like someone made flowers on top of it, and I was like, this is like the perfect thing for flower communion. We need to have more food associated with our celebrations. And so I made like a flower communion focaccia. I was like, I'm going to start the tradition of making flower themed food.
I'm one of those people, but then I try to also do the like, listen, here's the dinosaur chicken nuggets I ate for dinner, and that's also real. Like, it's not always like this, I promise. Here's my frozen breakfast burritos and all that good stuff too. It happens. All dinner churches, I've been to several, and they all can be really different. They're different models, and depending on who your community is and what your goals are. So like, I think about the food, right? And I've been to dinner churches that people come early and help cook, and I've been to dinner churches that are potluck, and I've been to dinner churches that are catered, and it's a really wide range of what makes sense for our community, for our budget, for what we're trying to achieve. I interned for a while at a dinner church in Massachusetts that the church provided soup and bread, and then people brought the rest of the meal to fill in. One thing that I have learned is that people often like being able to contribute in some way. So whether that's potluck or helping cook or some other piece of that, where we offer a blessing, where we bless each other with food through the camera, or we do a mindful bite, which is a kind of slowing down, grounding that involves food. So our order of service is generally some sort of welcome and gathering, a mindful bite, one song, an activity or a story. And then for us, the big piece of it, and I think this is true at a lot of dinner churches, is small group conversation.
Well, I tend to make more space for table conversations and more space for people to get up and go get their food and then sit down and settle in if we're in person. When we're online, it's more of a streamlined, like move through the service. There are some core things that really get to the heart of what is important here, and that is embodiment and participation and leveraging the wisdom in the room, which can be so powerful and is so important in what we're doing here.
I mean, it's something that physically feeds you. Like the fact that we can take this thing and like put it in our body and it makes us go. That's really cool. And the fact that we can do intention with that we can intentionally choose what food we're going to eat and cook in a certain way and eat it with certain people. The thing that makes things spiritual is often intention. And so putting intention behind this thing that we do all the time. Like I think about what I eat every day and does it shape who I am, like what I choose at the cafeteria? Am I a hummus person?
As I take a bite thinking like, wow, a lot of people were involved in this. Like that level of intention already is so powerful.
When we share the same foods, our molecules are fundamentally changed.
I mean, okay, so can we talk about that for just a minute? Just a minute. Let's just talk about the fact of like our lives on Zoom or on YouTube or on like just on camera, right? Because I think a lot of us are experiencing more time on camera than we were before. And like this idea that like you know, you're in the meeting and people are like, oh, I'm gonna turn off my camera because I'm eating, you know. And I get it, like being, you know, like not wanting people to see you eat and stuff, but also can we just like normalize the fact that we're all like human beings, and if we were in a meeting together, like I'd be eating in front of you, like that just would happen. So,
and Shannon, I love that you want to, you know, break the stigma around eating together, and not everybody is ready to like take a bite fully on camera. I get that. And right, you know, because usually when you're not sitting around a table, you're not this close and looking right at each other in the same way. I understand it's more intimate. Hi, Bliss.
No, I will say that I did make a mistake one time of eating in a recorded meeting and then watching the recording, and I was like, oh, okay, so I'm going to make sure I don't do that next time, because that doesn't need to be like there for everybody to.
I did make the mistake of taking an actual bite of bread during when we did an agape feast, or a ritual where we feed one another via the camera, and I took a real bite. Needed to talk, right? I needed to talk right afterward, and my mouth was full, and I was like, "Oh, okay, now we're gonna fake it." Oh, yes, okay, say the blessing another time.
I think it resonates because it's similar to youth worship. For those people who have not been blessed to participate in youth worship, we call it circle worship. And it's literally in a circle. Like you're often in a room sitting in a circle, and then whoever's leading a certain part will step into the center to lead. I do have to like walk in circles, and I'm like, am I walking too fast? Am I walking too slow? But it's very interactive. The thing that makes youth worship is that there's a piece that is interactive. We have some sort of ritual, and dinner church is inherently interactive. You're all eating together. The number one way that we got youth to show up to things at my church was by always having food.
One other thing that I wanted to mention, I know we're wrapping up pretty soon, but just the ways that embodied worship that gets us out of our heads and into our bodies and leverages the power of the room, pushes against white supremacy culture in a number of ways. And we can do big, powerful work from a really grounded, human, heart-centered place.
I'm ready to go eat some food. I'm hungry. How about y'all? Sanctuary Boston with Karishma Gottfried and Matt Meyer.
Something we like to say at Sanctuary Boston is, we're going to start with singing, and then we're going to do some more singing.
we came together to kind of envision what a different kind of UU worship gathering might look like, particularly what it would feel like, what it would sound like. And I've always been interested in how to create worship that is embodied, that's heart-centered, that's particularly uses music to create connection and find meaning. So that was part of my interest in Sanctuary, and I'm still doing that these days and love it as much as ever.
We also like to say, no volunteering without joy. And that is especially coming from youth leadership where there's lots of volunteering and a lot of joy, but also a lot of stress. Sanctuary has been a great place that just everybody is so involved. So there's music, there's ritual, shared ritual. We always do our joys and sorrows. When we're in person, we light candles and sing Sanctuary. We have community members sharing reflections, which I really love. I think that comes back again to more traditional youth and young adult styles of worship, where there isn't like one person preaching a sermon, but there's different members of our community and people outside of our community welcomed in who are sharing their stories.
I grew up UU, but in some ways I still had a conversion experience as a youth by being immersed in the circle worship gatherings and conferences and and camps and things. And, those communities went so deep and so quickly because they used the tools of singing in particular, but other spiritual practice together to really foster intimacy and connection. And I remember this feeling of going back to my church on Sunday morning and being like, well, this isn't Unitarian Universalism. Like, there's no feeling, there's no real connection. We're just going through the motions. The music is like performed, it's not participatory. And we got that feeling sometimes, but not often enough. And while we loved the message of Unitarian Universalism, we wanted something more heartfelt, something more emotional. A lot of you churches, I think, pride themselves that we don't have to leave our minds or our intellect at the door when we come in. We don't have to leave our reason at the door. But too often we leave our heart or our bodies at the door, and those are just kind of secondary or off to the side.
I think the funny thing with youth and emerging adults, especially, and all groups that are designated by age, is as with time, people grow up and age out. And I think that, centering a community around young adult voices and experiences is something that has to continually be growing because people are growing up and there are more people becoming young adults. I just have always felt so welcomed in sanctuary spaces in ways that I haven't always felt in a typical UU congregation. And because we aren't a congregation, a brick and mortar congregation, we have a little bit more of that flexibility and the passion to know that we're doing this as a service to Unitarian Universalism as a whole, that it's a ministry that we're providing because it is a good thing to do, not because we specifically as Sanctuary are going to be more successful because of it.
I just want to highlight what you just said, which was that a congregation can do campus ministry or young adult ministry, and it doesn't have to be anything about gaining members or gaining pledges or gaining money or any of that. It can actually be a service to Unitarian Universalism.
What I'd been told that like young adults don't want to go to church on Sunday morning, I was like, oh, that's a lie. They just want this. They want something different. But sometimes we see that and we think, okay, if you build it, they will come. If you put a electric guitar up front, or if you structure it in this different way, then the young people will come in the doors. And I think it's important to say that Sanctuary, there was, a year of conversations before our first worship. I think another thing we can do on Sunday mornings is to think of the choir as worship leaders rather than performers. That the choir's job, and certainly the music director's job, is to invite congregational music and congregational singing, not to perform for the congregation. In our UU communities, we do such a good job of ministering to our children and then to our youth. And then we just kind of leave them on their own. And if and when they go to college, the evangelicals are there, other denominations are there, and Unitarian Universalism is absent. And other folks are more than happy to provide that spiritual home for them. And we know that about 75% of them leave Unitarian Universalism and they never come back. They don't come back when they have children. That's not what the numbers seem to indicate. they're gone and they don't come back. My heart has just been broken, you know, being in conversation with other religious professionals about how hard this has been. You know, the Great Resignation is real for our ministers and music directors and religious educators. It's been really rough. Talked about like, how do we make this feel the way it feels in person? So we can't sit in a circle, but let's ask people to stay in gallery view. We're focused on, as many congregations are saying these days, connection, not perfection. So let's do live music. The sound quality won't be as good, but it'll be a little more personal and connecting, we think. Let's do joys and sorrows and figure out how to do that with people sharing in the chat still. Let's still have 12 worship leaders for every service, so it's still multivocal. And that has just worked really well for us, kind of to my surprise. So we have, I think, twice as many people participating in worship now, and ever since we went online, than we did in person in the before times.
And I'll just say, as an emerging adult now, I had the extreme pleasure of being mentored and getting to work in partnership with both Eric and Shannon as a youth. And so it's really great to be back here, and Amy behind the scenes. And so it's just a stellar team, and I'm so grateful for you all.
Wrapping up an amazing year together. We've come close to the end here.
Yes, we have.
I'm getting sad. This is resonating. This whole episode resonates for me. I could do this for hours. It's a love fest. It's a love fest. Yeah, I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
Whoosh! And we're done. To be continued. Get amped for more Just Breathe Live coming in September.